2. We're continuing on with chapter 27 section 1 with the flatworms, and we got all of the the defining features of this group. So now we're going to look at what are the characteristics of the three groups that make up flatworms. So there are three groups within our flatworms. First ones are turbellarians, flukes, and tapeworms, and most of the turbellarians are going to be free living, and this is just going to represent kind of a smaller population because most other flatworm species are parasites. So besides that first group, the turbellarians, almost all of our flatworms are going to be parasitic. So these turbellarians they are free-living flatworms, and most of them live in marine, which is just salt or fresh water, and a lot of them live in the sand or mud underneath stones and shells. So this one, not a lot to be said about them, just because the most important thing you need to know is that they are the free-living flatworms. So our next group, getting on now to the parasitic kick here, are flukes. So flukes are parasitic flatworms, and they infect the internal organs of their host. So they would get inside like a heart or a liver, things like that. So that's what flukes do. And they can infect either blood or organs of the host. So usually they get into organs, but they can infect blood as well. And some are external parasites, again, meaning that they will just affect on the outside. However, again, most of them affect the inside. And in the typical life cycle of parasitic flukes, the fluke will live in multiple hosts. So it doesn't just affect one type of organism, it'll affect multiple types within its just one life cycle. And then here's a picture, kind of what this life cycle will look like, but we're going to break it down about what each one of these steps shows. So the blood fluke is the example we're going to use, and its primary host is a human. So that's why I got a picture of our lady out there. She's in the water, you can see, without any shoes on. And so blood flukes will infect humans by burrowing through the skin. So in this case, this fluke is going to burrow through the skin of those exposed feet there in the water. That's how it's going to get into the human. It's going to go there, it's going to burrow in through her toes and get into her blood that way. So once inside the human, they are carried to blood vessels of the intestines. They are carried to the blood vessels of the intestines. So they make it to the feet, they travel in the blood, they move to the blood vessels of the intestines. So in the intestines, the flukes will mature and reproduce, and then the embryos are released and passed out of the body with feces. So the adult fluke might be able to stay inside there, and then it'll just release the embryos out into the world through the feces of the human. So if the embryos reach water, they will develop into a swimming larva that infect a snail, and that is the intermediate host. And then an intermediate host is just the organism in which a parasite reproduces asexually. So after the embryo leaves the human in the form of feces, if it lands into the water, it will grow into that larva, and then that larva will come around and it will infect a snail, which is again the intermediate host. And then larvae that result from asexual reproduction are released from the snail into the water to begin the cycle again. And then again, remember right back in the beginning we had our lady standing in water, so those adults are going to make it back into, this tailed larva is going to make its way back into our human to start the process over. So our next example of flatworms are tapeworms, and these are obviously long, flat, parasitic worms that are adapted to life inside the intestines of their host. So most of us have probably seen tapeworms before, heard horror stories about how long they can get. So that's what we're going to take a look at more, is just look at what exactly tapeworms do and how do they actually infect us. So tapeworms have no digestive tract, and they absorb digested food directly through their body walls. And again, parasites won't need a digestive tract because they're already taking digested food in, so they have no need to digest the food themselves. And one big feature that makes a tapeworm kind of able to take this food directly from their host is that they have a head that's known as a scolex. And this is a structure that contains suckers or hooks, and therefore the tapeworm will use its scolex to attach to the intestinal wall of its host. So it has a big nasty mouth basically filled with these suckers and hooks that allow it to attach to its host. And then there again is just kind of some of the terms we're going to see when we look at what exactly a tapeworm is. So a big one is proglottids, and these are just the segments that make up most of the worm's body. So if you look, there's definite segments here in this in this tapeworm, and these are known as proglottids. And then mature proglottids will contain both male and female reproductive organs, so they serve the function to help the the tapeworm reproduce. And then just sperm is produced by the testes, and they can fertilize eggs of other tapeworms or of the same individual. So they can actually fertilize themselves, or they can in fact fertilize another individual if needed. And then after eggs are fertilized, the proglottids will break off and burst to release the zygotes. So we can see in this picture right here, we have a literal bursting of the segments to release basically baby tapeworms, the zygotes. And then the zygotes are then passed out of the host in feces, and then the eggs are ingested by an intermediate host where they hatch and grow into larvae. So let's say they leave the human, and then let's say they're ingested by a rabbit outside, and then the larva will then burrow into the intermediate host muscle tissue, so they'll burrow into the muscle tissue of the bunny, and then the larva will form a dormant protective stage called the cyst, and then if a human eats this incompletely cooked meat containing these cysts, the larvae become active and grow into adult worms within the human's intestines, beginning the cycle again. So I just use rabbit as an example. It could be any animal there to start this whole process over again. So we got to make sure we cook our meat thoroughly, or else you might be getting a tapeworm. So that's it for this video. Let me know if you have any questions.